Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
Good evening, MMOA community. My name is Anushka Ranaraja, and I am a TA with the Modern Management of the Older Adult Division of the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Today, we're going to talk about motivational interviewing, which I referred to in my last podcast on fatigue. But first, let's talk about what's happening in the MMOA community. Alex and I will be in Annapolis, Maryland this weekend, and Julie will be in Central South Carolina. After that, we have about 4 more courses to take us through to the end of 2023. MMOA Level 1 and Level 2, formerly known as Essential Foundations and Advanced Concepts, are going on right now, but we will have new cohorts starting January 10th and 11th, respectively. If you have any questions, hop on the website. We just launched our ICE certifications page, so check that out if you're interested in looking at the different certifications that ICE has to offer. But for now, let's talk about the topic at hand, motivational interviewing. So this is a really important skill to have as a clinician, as it allows us to find the best way and approach to health behavior change with our patient, which really will allow us to get buy into the program that we implement. There are 4 steps that I'm going to talk about with motivational interviewing, which include engage, focus, evoke, and plan. So step 1, engage. Kind of just like what we do anyway, typically, but we're going to try to do it better. So first things first is you really want to build rapport with the patient to allow them to trust you and to allow them to, or for them to allow you to guide them both safely and effectively through their plan of care to really reach their goals. When engaging with your patient, you want to approach them with compassion and empathy and really carry that throughout your interactions with them. This may even mean asking for permission to discuss a topic of health behavior, this may be asking permission to discuss that certain topic of health behavior change to make sure they are comfortable talking about it. When we're talking about this and asking them questions about it, you really want to use open-ended questions to allow your patient to express their goals, motivations, and fears of obstacles without our influence. Like, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, like that can be scary, but maybe they don't feel scared of the actual action. Maybe there's other components to it that they're really feeling, and we want to allow them space to give us that information. So open-ended questions are typically starting with how, what, tell me about, and it allows your patient to express their perspective and concerns. When you're asking these questions, you want to start more general and then really move to something more specific. So take my patient I talked about with fatigue. Something I might have asked her in the beginning was, what would you like to accomplish by doing PT? And her answer was to improve balance with walking. When I started with her, she's a wheelchair user for community ambulation and uses a rollator for household ambulation. In the past, not too long prior to her having multiple falls, she was using a cane, but now she feels weak and like she's going to fall if she uses her cane. So maybe my next question to her is, tell me why balance with walking is important to you. Because it's easy enough to think of that simple answer of, hey, she doesn't want to fall. But why is walking important to her, right? Like that's the next step that you want to think about. So when I asked her that, she said that she wants to be able to walk up the stairs to her seat when she goes to the theater with her family, because she goes to the theater about once to twice a month with her family. But she wants to do that just using her cane and the railing of the steps, or just her, like the arm of her family member, without fear of falling. Okay, so great. Now I know that one, she wants to be able to engage with her family, right? That's like such a huge thing, especially for our older adults, is it being able to engage with their community, their family, their friends, because we know that that social isolation can be really debilitating to someone. But also this interaction includes walking with the cane and stair negotiation with the cane and handhold assist. But what are our barriers, right? It's like, what is she really having issues with? And that's going to bring us to step 2, or focus. So we want to focus the conversation on what the patient is saying and how they feel. We want to take time to reflect on what we just heard. You're going to summarize it back to them to make sure we understand what they're saying. Because sometimes, there's going to be miscommunications and it's not exactly what they meant, or they just misspoke and actually meant something different. So this really allows us to get clarity on those things. To guide effectively through a plan of care, we need to know where we are going. And this is an ongoing process to maintain the right direction through our plan of care. But when you're looking at that focus piece, maybe our follow-up question is just, what are your current obstacles to walk in the theater and up the stairs with your cane? Because we've gotten to the point where we walk through her house without anything other than me holding onto her belt. So what is she fearful of at that point? And she says that she notes that her left leg sometimes gives out. So she is scared that she will fall if she only uses her cane. So now I know the components I want to address with treatment to achieve this goal. She needs to strengthen her legs, especially her left leg. We have to work on sequencing of walking with the cane to make sure she's doing that safely. We want to work on sequencing for stair negotiation, same thing because of the safety. And then kind of just overall postural stability, because we're working in the community and you never know. And that could be a big issue with falling, right? It's like that reactive postural control. But now the point is, it's like, okay, we get it. We get what she wants. There might be more questions that I ask, but how do we get them to understand what we're going to connect and say, okay, these are the components we're going to work on, right? We want to evoke our patient's feelings, motivation, and concern to promote that change that we need. We need to know the underlying concerns. So her leg giving out, that might increase or decrease motivation to change. If you listen to that fatigue podcast, another thing you would have heard is this patient really had a hard time getting out of bed on days that she didn't have interaction with her family or a planned social event. She lives in an independent living facility with a 24-hour care, but that just wasn't enough. Just knowing that she had to get out of bed for the sake of getting out of bed was not enough. So how do we use this motivational interviewing to really evoke that emotion and give her the drive that she needs to get out of bed? So first thing I really thought about is, okay, like, what are the things she enjoys doing and how do we implement those things? But we also want to really hit upon evoking positive feelings and motivations towards movement. So if we can build correlation to how she's moving and where she's going towards her goals, that's going to be really helpful to her. Something I might say to her is, I appreciate that you got out of bed to do exercises, even though it is hard, and you did a good job today. Another thing I really harp on is like really showing her when she's getting stronger, because that can really be helpful to her in seeing the difference. Because sometimes when our patients are kind of down, it's really hard to see where they've come from, but evoking that emotion of like, hey, like, get excited. You did so great today. You were able to lift that 24-pound kettlebell when you weren't able to lift 8 pounds without feeling like you were going to fall over when we started. Right. So seeing those steps along the way of how are we going to build this patient up so they feel the confidence and self-efficacy for being able to continue with their plan of care and meeting their goal. People are more likely to follow through with change when they have a specific plan and expressed intention to carry out that plan, which brings us to step 4. So depending on what you've heard through all of this process, you're going to be able to kind of assess patient's readiness to change. The next step is creating a plan, but sometimes that next step in that plan is to have another conversation because the patient isn't ready to make change yet. I don't know if you remember like the pre-contemplation and contemplation phase, like those different steps are really important here because if they're still in pre-contemplation, they're not really ready for a plan of action. The plan of action for us is like, okay, how do we evoke this next emotion to have that drive to set an actual action plan physically? Okay. So when creating a plan, especially, I'm going to say for myself, like I can give a patient a plan and be like, okay, like let's do this. But if you let your patient have autonomy and while you just offer guidance, your patient's going to feel like they're in the driver's seat and have way better control, which might be just another good factor for them to continue on improving. So while I instead might offer different options that they might like to do, I really want the patient to decide what those things that they implement are. So example for my patient, I talked about this earlier, but she really likes shopping. She really likes going out to dinner. So I told her caregivers, like, let's try to do one of these things a day, but she gets to choose what she does. And it's just a way to make sure she gets out of bed, gets moving. We try to have her walk as much as she can with it, and then she'll transition into her wheelchair for community ambulation. But just giving those little tidbits throughout can be helpful, but really just letting her guide her care is going to be best. And I think like going through this process with my patient has been great. We had such a successful thing where she was actually able to play a safe version of tennis with her grandchildren, and it brought her so much joy. Or she was telling me just today that she was dancing a little bit at the theater when she went last night, but the fact that she feels safe to do that is so important, right? But I will use all of those tidbits that she gives me and bring that back around and wrap it back into our plan and how I'm going to use like really evoke emotion and maintain our focus in that plan of care so that she gets the most out of our program. But really at the end of the day, it's like, get the most out of your life, right? Like you're still alive. You do not need to be in bed. And I've had a conversation with her. I was like, you do not need to be in bed. If your goal is to be out with your grandchildren, out with your families, being in bed isn't going to be helpful. So how do we get you motivated to do those things that are going to help you move further along with what you want, where you want to be? I think revisiting these conversations is going to be really important with patients because sometimes those factors that change what their obstacles are, that's like a constant change, right? Is their motivations might change, what they want to do might change. Hey, maybe they met their goal, but they have a further goal that we could still help them with. But you're not going to know that unless you're constantly asking questions. I think open-ended questions by far are going to be the best thing when you're talking to patients. Like maybe start and end your day. Like, hey, how do you feel about what we did today? Do you feel like it's going to help you get better? I do think like asking how they're receiving treatment is also really helpful because then I know maybe I want to make some changes the next time. All right. So first 4 things to remember, the 4 steps for motivational interviewing are engage. So make sure that you're getting really good information, building rapport with your patient, making sure that you find out what their obstacles are using those open-ended questions. That's step 1. Step 2 is focus. How are we going to find the information we used from that first part and reflect and summarize back to make sure that we're meeting the needs throughout our plan of care for our patient. And then evoke. You're going to use their patient's emotions and their excitement and their frustrations and what they're really loving out of programs in order to get them feeling better. And then making a plan. Make sure that your plan is going to focus on what they want by giving them autonomy to building that plan with you. Okay. Compassion, empathy throughout your plan of care with them. Your patients are going to know if that's not genuine. So I think that is a big thing to be able to work on, is how are you generally going to express that compassion and empathy towards them. And then remember that this is a continuous process. It's not at your initial eval, we're going to talk about these things and then that's it. Revisit them constantly. Make sure that your plan is effective towards their goals and that their goals are maintaining that same, or maybe they're changing and we need to adjust, right? If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If not, I will see you in about a month back on here, and have a great night. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.